Hey folks, Eric once again, and we're going to talk about the victim mentality from a comment that came from Steve regarding my video from yesterday about political correctness and why we need it and how it all works. So yeah, let's just take a look at the comment right away from Steve, who's a great guy, Wind and Raven. You can see an interview I did on this channel previously with him. He is a recovery counselor or something like that. And yeah, so basically, social justice, called the progressive movement in the United States, is based on a victim mindset. We should discuss this here on my channel. This one was so hot for me and I was so inspired to make a video immediately. I didn't have time to schedule anything with you, Steve. So I just want to make this video now. And if there's a follow-up conversation, I'm totally down. So victim mentality. This is something, yes, collectivists can have a victim mentality. But it would be only fair to say that if collectivists have a victim mentality, then individualists have a perpetrator mentality. Let's get some more resolution on this. The idea of collectivism is that a society can be stronger as a whole that looks out for each other and makes a unit that's, you know, more than just individual interests, but people are working together to look out for the needs of each other. And as I invoked on spiral dynamics, there are several collectivist stages and individualist stages, and they go from one to the other. From, you can check out my intro video on this channel to spiral dynamics as well, which you can find if you search the channel. But basically what it comes down to is, yes, collectivist societies do use victim narratives to motivate the emotions of the masses, and it works very, very well. And I would actually say, and basically individualist societies basically use perpetrator narratives, or individualist narratives of, you need to be strong, you need to do this, you need to da 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 da. It's all about you, it's all about what you do and all that sort of stuff. That's the individualist narrative. That's stage red in stage beige in spiral dynamics is like a dog who sees me like, they won't think before taking what they want. Stage red is the stage of criminals, where they will put lots of conniving and sort of like they will put sort of lots of conniving and sort of like like a Viking. They don't care if they harm other people, but they'll put lots of intelligence into how they do it so it achieves the maximum benefit. Now, stage orange, the next collectivist stage, is the capitalist stage that we're so indoctrinated in growing up in North America. And that's where you play by a set of rules that's supposed to give every individual the opportunity to thrive. And inadvertently or consequently, this system does create lots of imbalance, as I said in the last video, lots of imbalance, but out of sight of the capitalist system. The capitalist system wants everything around the capitalists to be perfectly good and perfect and developed, and so there's progress, lots of science, lots of cleanliness, lots of affluence and all that sort of stuff. But then on the other side of the world, you've got some place where people are being victimized by the capitalist perpetrators, because they're, as I said in the video yesterday, they're perpetrating this elaborate system, elaborate way of doing business that leaves the other people with less. That's the idea of like this victimization, and the idea of perpetrating your own individual path in life. And for you as a human being to succeed, you need to elevate yourself above other human beings. And we've globalized this concept over the last period of human history. And now it's like people in Africa, they're fucked, but in North America, people are reasonably good. But then, the capitalist system of North America is predatory, and it's perpetrating this scam to the point where now most Americans are obese and sick, because that's what the dominant corporate structure in the country of the food and medical system wants them to be, because they make the most money off of them eating shitty food that's cheap to produce and paying a bunch of money for it, fast food and processed food. and paying a bunch of medical treatments that result from the shitty food they're eating, basically, and taking drugs and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, going back to the point, collectivist societies care more about other people. They care more about social harmony. They care more about giving everybody a chance, protecting the weak. So a lot of the time when you see collectivist narratives, I'll give an example here in Serbia. In Serbia, we have a government led by Aleksandar Vučić, and his political party, their sort of slogan is "For our children." Why children? Because, well, children are, easy to victimize. Protecting human children have this unique situation where they need adults to thrive. You need to protect children as an adult. When you have them, they aren't just like, coming out of the womb and picking their own food and, able to survive on their own. We need to protect them. So children are very vulnerable. And so, yeah, in the narrative, yeah. And I think even the most individualist people want to live in a world where children are protected. And so yeah. And so then you have this wounding that occurs in children because they're so vulnerable, where if human children have this need for emotional attachment with people because they know instinctively that if they don't have that emotional attachment to the adults in their life, the adults will not nurture them, basically. And so there's a lot of wounding which occurs in this, and lots of narratives, lots of things that are holding people back in life and making them victims are this psychology that was implanted in early life, either, the anxious attachment style, the avoidant attachment style, feelings of not being good enough, not being loved, not having enough attention, being scolded, having their true authenticity suppressed by adults and all that sort of jazz, or all that sort of heavy metal music that's bombarded on our children. That sort of leads to a lot of these sort of psychological features that you do find later in life, like this victim mentality. So let's break down the victim, but let's get a little more resolution on this. I'd like to say that as you evolve in society on the spiral dynamics, and once you get into the higher stages, and green is one of the higher stages, it's the last tier 1 stage. Political correctness is coming from green, whereas on blue, the last collectivist stage, we had dogma, religion, people from the church, the government, so on and so forth, telling you how to live your life and demanding absolute respect of their authority from a dogmatic way. They're not earning their merit as individuals. They're a part of the system. They're the patriarchs. And yeah, the green people really hate this because it is very antiquated. It does restrict a lot of freedom that we gained in the orange stage. So you need to check out Spiral Dynamics if you haven't already. But okay, so I would say that we could break it down into victim mentality. Victim mentality is that of those who have been victimized, like, but the green people, the political correctness is actually more of a vigilante mentality. Like they're protecting other people, because it's usually like upper middle class white people who are the most visible proponents of political correctness, because they have achieved a level of affluence that allows them to actually be edging out of the scarcity mentality and moving towards trying to make a fairer world for all people, which I talked a lot in the past video. So it's like, yeah, what does it mean? Like, it means that you are out of scarcity. Your life is fine, and you want to be a vigilante to bring justice, social justice, to the entire world. So victim mentality, vigilante mentality, I'm suggesting that as an edit, pertaining to different stages of spiral dynamics. Because yeah, okay, so back in the days when we used to have wars, my grandparents went through this in World War II. Like within the space of about 5 years, it went from being on one side to the other side, and being on both sides of the victim and the conquering army, and the insights of that whole ordeal, and how my grandfather wanted part of neither of them was very interesting. I think that's why I'm here today, because he survived with his intelligence to think through this stuff rather than just sticking to a narrative of like, I'm the invading army, or I'm the oppressed enemy of these people and they're oppressing me. He kind of worked his way out of that with his intelligence and business skills and negotiation skills and all this sort of stuff. Anyway, so yeah, back in the day of armies, moving back and forth, coming and wiping out large amounts of the population. This is stage blue in spiral dynamics with a shadow of stage red, pure power, but it's set on the stage of stage blue, which is the traditional society, and one traditional society going to war with another traditional society, or one army against another army, whatever. Yeah, there was lots of victimization happening. Now, these days, most of the people who are propagating this sort of politically correct ideology are of the upper middle class, or at least middle class in a lot of cases, or upper class people who are essentially doing really well by the current system of, the Western society, the traditional Western society and its patriarchal institutions, the capitalist Western economy that evolved out of that. And they're doing really well. But now they really see that it's time to get back, because they got to a stage of affluence and they got lots of money, but that didn't quite make them feel good about themselves, because it's still obvious if you're living life in a lot of places, capitalism, all this stuff, that there's a lot of damage to be done. And once you make enough money and you're out of scarcity, you start to look into things like the ecosystem and where is humanity going, and how can I make a more sustainable life? How can I get more in touch with my feelings, because I suppress lots of them to become successful sort of narratives. And you start to look out for other people as well. You start to want the whole world to, you come to the realization, now that I have wealth, I want the whole world to have wealth. And then you start to look at like, okay, so who are the victims of this current system, which was very much based on this stubborn ideology of us versus them, of the traditional society, where racism is a pretty predominant feature. If you look at traditional societies, the religious crusades, wars, in the Balkans in the 90s, it's all based on us versus them. And then in capitalism, it becomes me versus the world, the next stage. And me versus the world, on top of a traditional society that had a certain sense of decency, turned into affluence. And after that, people are like, well, we're doing good now. We're like, North American or Western European society that has done really well. Me and everybody I know are fine. Let's see, but there's people in Africa who are not fine. We need to help them. There's people in Asia who are making our clothes in bad conditions. We need to help them, so on and so forth. And it's a good thing, folks. And you need to embrace it. So I would say, but then if you look at stage yellow on spiral dynamics, systems thinking, which is like where you try to make a system that helps, it's once even more above the capitalism one, because the capitalism one is like, I want a fair system where me and other people who work hard will get a level of wealth and affluence without having people coming and just taking it away from them, without having it threatened by war, without having it threatened by religious ideologies, that sort of what they consider like wackery, like crazy ideas of religious people who believe in whatever God or belief system, which is not really tangible in this world. Yeah, so after that, so stage yellow is where you're above that. You're above green even, which is this politically correct vigilante mentality, rather than the victim mentality, where you're trying to help you're a vigilante for all of the people in the world to not be victimized by the evil capitalist system and, the patriarchy that was making dogmas and wars and treating, women like property, or whatever the arguments are, which are all valid in some way, but over sensationalized and propagandized and dogmatized in a lot of ways as well, to the point where, like, it's hard to digest some of these narratives if you're like a rational thinking person. Yeah, then you get to stage level yellow. And I would like to say, rather than a perpetrator mentality, you should be propagating a perpetuating mentality. Perpetuating rather than perpetrating. You're perpetuating the type of system that you want humanity to have, rather than just calling out injustice like Stage Green. You're perpetuating this, the world that you want to see. A very good example of this right now is Charles from the Cardano cryptocurrency project, who's trying to revolutionize Africa. He's already a billionaire. He's actually looking for real world tangible solutions to solve the world's problems, rather than the Stage Green, which points fingers at evil capitalists without actually, and says we need to tear this whole system down without actually providing workable, sound, rational solutions for the problems. So what does this mean? If you have a victim mentality, if you feel that perhaps in childhood, lots of our trauma comes from childhood experiences when we were weak. And remember, you will be old one day and you will be weak. I'm pretty sure, unless you die instantly in an accident, you will be weak. And what does that mean? That means that you're going to go back to the victim mentality in some place. You're going to be victimized by some force of even your own entropy of your body, right? So you might be strong now, in from young adulthood until, middle-aged, end of middle-aged, until you get old, until you start getting frail. You may feel like, what's the point of the victim mentality? But let me tell you, when you were a child, you needed other adults to watch out for you and not just themselves. You needed them to embrace you as part of their collective of people that they were protecting, whether that was through a traditional society, a family unit, or anything like that. And even then, even though you did have people who were there to protect you, life was complex enough that it left you with some sort of wounding and trauma that probably motivates you to this day, motivated you to be a super go-getter individualist, or motivated you to be a super empathetic collectivist, or whatever it is, motivates you to this day. Lots of addictions that that people like myself suffer from are because we're so good at being self-sufficient individualists, and the reason we became like that is because of some sort of perceived by us lack in our childhood that made us want to become self-reliant rather than relying on others for validation, become self-regulating in terms of our emotions. But that's still leaving a massive hole, because we somehow developed a belief that we can't depend on other people. And, we burn ourselves out so much, and then it comes like, in the evening, and you just want to have a drink to forget about how hard you had to work that day in order to protect yourself from the world as an individualist. And essentially you had to compete, you had to go out there, you had to make deals with life, you had to make sure you had the upper hand on life, got on top of that bitch and made it scream your name, basically. And it's exhausting. So that drives your psychology. And the perpetrator mentality, if you look at cycles of abuse, cycles of like violence in families and stuff like that, it often comes from people who are victims then become the perpetrators. So it's a pendulum swing that happens throughout our lives. Violence, victims of violence become perpetrators of violence, so on and so forth. And we're trying to evolve that as humans. So it's good to see political correctness being vigilantes for what they view as the oppressed. They're fucking batshit crazy from a rational perspective sometimes. It does denote a certain dangerous narrative, us versus them sort of thing, which does lead to a lot of really, like, it's a mob. It's a collectivist mob that's out to get whoever they point a finger at as the witch that they want to burn, basically. So, but that doesn't mean individualism is good either. Yeah, look at criminals, look at capitalists who will, destroy the ecosystem just so that they can drive their profits up. Look at these drug companies that have made like genetically modified bunch of food and made a bunch of Americans fat with their processed food, and and actually like it when there's cancer in the world because they can sell medicine for that and all that sort of stuff. They can sell pharmaceuticals, and how much they demonize anything that's like a natural cure like fasting, and because it's just like it's much more, you need to believe it for it to work. You need to actually bring it into your habit, bring it into your whole being, holistic being, and you also need to make it you can't measure it as well because it's natural, it's nature doing its work. So individualism is actually the thing that is unnatural. Being a perpetrator, rising above the crowd to dominate it, is part of nature indeed, but it's a lonely part of nature. And it's also the sort of thing that is unnatural when you look at, we are all coming from the same life force, the same thing. I'm getting spiritual now into like kind of like stage turquoise and spiral dynamics. We're all from the same consciousness, and wanting to differentiate yourself and want to differentiate yourself from the collective is sort of an act of treason. And that's where a lot of the evil, a treason to the divine, let's say, that's where life itself comes from, our egos. And a lot of evil comes from that. Egos and evil come from that, basically. And what that essentially means is you have your ego and you do what's best for you. You're number one. Individual societies, criminals work like this. Capitalists work like this. Collectivists are much closer to the feminine, divine energy of the collective and the energy that gives rise to all of us. But the idea, folks, is to, as I said, evolve your consciousness so you're not a victim, but a vigilante. So that you're not a perpetrator, but a perpetuator of other individuals also being able to make a positive change in the world. So I'll leave it there, folks. Hope you enjoyed this. Thanks a lot. Bye now. And thank you, Steve, for the comment.